And I was told that I should stop my IVF round, that even if I was successful, I would most likely be dead in 5 years and leave a baby motherless, and that I should get my affairs in order.
Welcome back to the Health Longevity Secrets Show, where we push the limits of human potential and unlock the secrets to our health and longevity with your host, Dr. Robert Lufkin.
Today's guest is Leslie Kenny, and you're about to discover the anti-aging molecule with the unfortunate name that you've probably never heard of, Spermidine. It activates autophagy, supports your immune system, helps with sleep, even grows your hair. Leslie was told she had just 5 years to live. Now at age 60, her biological age is 21. This is one episode you do not want to miss.
And now, please enjoy this week's episode.
Hey, Leslie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob.
I'm so excited to talk about this fascinating area about spermidine and autophagy that has the ability to really do some amazing things with our health. But before we dive in, since you haven't been on the program before, maybe you could just take a moment and tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be so interested in this fascinating area.
Well, first and foremost, I am a patient advocate. So, 21 years ago, I was 39 years old. That was 2004. And I was in the middle of my fifth IVF round using donor eggs, no less, and had reported some pain in my hands to my doctor, who called me, asked me to come in for a meeting because I had lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And I was told that I should stop my IVF round, that even if I was successful, I would most likely be dead in 5 years and leave a baby motherless, and that I should get my affairs in order. And there is nothing like a talking to from your doctor where they discuss your mortality to get your attention. And they certainly had my attention, but the solution for the rheumatoid arthritis, which was suppressing my immune system, and with lupus, simply to wait for the inevitable decline to happen, did not sit well with me. And that's because I have two grandparents who went to medical school at the University of Kyoto in Japan. And I've always been taught that the body has an innate wisdom, that it knows how to heal if we can just bring the body back to baseline, to homeostasis. And as I received my first box of immunosuppressing injectables, which I honestly hated injecting into myself, I thought, I wonder if there's another way. It's kind of what author Brene Brown always says, when we have negative thoughts in our head, is that really true? And in this case, the negative thought had been planted by my doctor. You have 5 years left to live. You should give up this IVF round. You should just accept increasing decline with the lupus. And I decided to go back to the patient chat rooms where I had done a lot of research on IVF. And here on the lupus bulletin boards, I found patients who had all been crowdsourcing the problem of lupus. And one of them told me about a unique intervention that had been used in Germany 4 years prior with 13 lupus patients, and every single one got better. And the therapy was called intravenous immunoglobulin, and or IVIG. And my doctor was not aware of it when I asked for it. She would not prescribe it for me. So again, I went back to the patient bulletin boards and I found names of doctors from the other patients who would prescribe it for me. I got 2 rounds of that, and it effectively modulated my immune system and it brought it back to baseline. Now, I knew that that was a temporary situation unless I remove the triggers to my immune system in my lifestyle. And these were things like my diet, poor sleep, poor movement, possibly past trauma. I mean, I basically turned over every rock, anything that might contribute to inflammation, chronic inflammation of the body, and might trigger my immune system. I was interested in, you know, basically hitting head on and dealing with it. So optimized everything, removed dairy, gluten, eggs, was making all my food, was making my own almond milk, was doing trauma therapy, stopped work just to get rid of the stress because that can lead to chronic inflammation too. And when I went back to retest, I'll never forget my doctor when she opened my file, which she had not had the opportunity to look at before my regular checkup. And she looked at it and she said, well, look at that. You don't have lupus or RA. And what? And she repeated it. And I just thought that's when the penny dropped. And I realized doctors can be wrong, right? They're not infallible. They are not all knowing. And patients have a role to play. And not taking advantage of that opportunity is a disservice to the doctor as well as the patient, because I am sure all doctors go into this profession wanting to heal their patients, but it is a collaboration. And the faster patients understand that they have a role to play, the better off we'll be as a society, especially because we're all getting older. In Japan right now, 33% of the population is over age 65. And this is our future. I think by 2030, those over age 60 are going to make up 20% of the American population. So I'm 60 now, we all need to get with the program, right? And it was essentially through that experience that I was later introduced to another compound that is capable of modulating the immune system. And that is this awkwardly named compound called spermidine, which has a magic capability, and that is to activate the cell renewal process that each of us can take advantage of, say if we're fasting, but also by getting more of these compounds in our food or helping our gut biome to make more by eating more fiber. So that's the background.
Well, it's a wonderful story and a great lead into this fascinating molecule with kind of the crazy name. By the way, how did it get that name anyway?
It was the great Antony van Leeuwenhoek, the Dutch biologist, who I suppose was casting around his study for things to put under his magnifying glass, and decided after he had exhausted hair, skin, and nails, bugs, and plants, let's try semen. And he noticed that in addition to the sperm, there were these crystals that dried alongside it, and decided to call that spermine. Fast forward a few hundred years later, other scientists discover another crystal, and because the die was cast by van Leeuwenhoek, they called it spermidine. But I joke that if a woman had discovered this, it would have a much more elegant name. And in fact, women manufacture a lot of spermidine in breast milk. But just so your listeners understand, we all make this. There's nothing to feel, awkward about with this compound. We're all making it in our gut biome. Hopefully, as we get older, we ingest it in plants. And when we're younger, up until around age 26, we're making it in our tissues too.
Yeah. And there's so much talk about molecules and supplements and everything. Let's go back to basics and put it in perspective. So this is spermidine, I guess, is what they call a polyadenine,
Amine.
right? So
Correct. That's correct.
it's not a peptide, right? There's a lot of talk about
No.
peptides like GLP-1s and things.
Yeah.
This is a different type of molecule. It's not a chain of amino acids like a
No.
protein or a peptide, correct?
No, it's made from S-adenosyl methionine or SAMe and L-ornithine, which is downstream from L-arginine. And so just so you know what the components are. So when we make it, especially as we get older, we have to take our own internal stores of SAMe and L-ornithine to make it, which potentially may rob us of some of that SAMe that keeps our mood up.
Mm. And so you mentioned before that that we both make it in our bodies, but we also get it in our food. Like two-thirds is produced by the gut and the body, and then but we also get it in our food. Is that right?
We do get it in our food, and it kind of depends. How much we make in our gut biome really depends on how well we've treated that gut biome. So, if we've been exposed to a lot of broad spectrum antibiotics, we may have wiped out some of the colonies of friendly bacteria that are capable of making spermidine for us. And we're then even more reliant on getting it from plants. But if we look at the long-lived populations around the world, the healthy centenarians have gut biome production of spermidine that looks like a healthy 50-year-old, which
Hmm.
is very
Hmm.
interesting because spermidine has been correlated with greater health span as well as lifespan in animals and in humans.
And also, I think it's one of those molecules we've talked about other ones on the podcast with aging that actually decreases. So the amount of spermidine that we make or is available to us for whatever reason decreases the older that we get. So there's
Yes.
potentially we're facing a liability there, all of us, just by aging alone, right? In spermidine deficiency, if you will, essentially.
Yeah, especially those who've been exposed to the standard American diet or the standard Western diet with a lot of ultra processed foods where we're not feeding our gut bugs. I mean, I always say that men and women, all men and women are eating for two. It doesn't matter whether you're pregnant or not. You need to feed yourself as well as your microbiome with fiber. But I think many of us have we've taken shortcuts. And I remember when I was at university, I had a lot of pizza and a lot of frozen yogurt, and I didn't get a lot of plants. And I certainly was exposed to a lot of broad spectrum antibiotics. So those folks like me, we need to pay particular attention and look for spermidine rich foods in our diet. And if we're not getting enough, then we need to look to supplement from whole food supplements.
So this is how we get spermidine. This is the risk we face as we get older. Now let's talk a little bit about what exactly does spermidine do? What does this molecule do for our body that's so beneficial? Can we break it down into mechanisms or something like that?
Well, I've already talked about autophagy, but it also activates something called mitophagy, which is mitochondrial renewal and rejuvenation. And then there's also virophagy, which is the sequestration of viruses. So I like to think of spermidine as a magic garbage bag into which you can place old or dysfunctional cellular material, mitochondrial material, or you can put viruses in there too. And individuals, for instance, who have recovered from a virus may find that they are lower in spermidine. And funnily, one of the ways that you can tell, because spermidine is throughout the entire body, it also happens to be in our hair follicles. And people who have recovered from a virus, sometimes a few months after they recover, they notice hair loss. And that's why it was around, I think, 20 to 25% of COVID patients reported hair shedding
Hmm.
afterwards.
Hmm.
And what was happening there was that they were using the spermidine to sequester or bag up the COVID virus. And because the body is simply looking to take it from anywhere in pursuit of preserving the organism, it doesn't care if your hair falls out. So that's what happened there. And of course, when mothers are breastfeeding, their bodies are prioritizing the baby over their own beautiful locks. So they are losing spermidine in their hair follicles for the benefit of the next generation. And they too have often reported hair loss afterwards.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit on this podcast about some pathways involving like mTOR,
Oh,
mechanistic
yes.
target of rapamycin,
Okay.
and autophagy, and also AMP kinase.
Yeah.
Is an effect modulated through mTOR?
No, it is not. And that is what's so interesting about it. So if we look at something like rapamycin, of course, mechanistic target of rapamycin is what mTOR stands for. That is using that pathway. But when you do that, you are going to not be able to build muscle. But what's interesting with spermidine is that you are using it goes through something called TFEB and hyposination, and it actually activates autophagy through this alternative pathway, which does not mean you will break down muscle. And that's what I think is so interesting. There are some people, my mother is 86 and she weighs about 86 pounds. And she, of course, would love to, reap the benefits of fasting. But I've said, Mom, it's impossible. You have no body weight. If you were to fast, the first thing that would go would be your muscle. And I need you to have muscle to prevent falls and frailty. So please do not fast. You will go into sarcopenia, and I need you instead to get spermidine-rich foods and spermidine, food-derived spermidine into your body to activate these pathways of renewal and rejuvenation without sacrificing muscle.
Yeah, such an important point. And this molecule, what's the regulatory status? In the US, it would be the FDA or similar organizations in the UK and Europe. Where does it stand there?
Well, the only regulatory body that has taken an opinion on spermidine is the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA. And they have only looked at food-derived spermidine, not synthetic spermidine like spermidine hydrochloride or spermidine trihydrochloride. And those are all over the market. But there's a single 28-day study of spermidine trihydrochloride in men. For safety, but there are no other safety studies. Whereas with food-derived spermidine, it's been in the food supply for millennia. So EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, has said you can safely take up to 6 milligrams of food-derived spermidine daily, but they're not synthetic. They have not ruled on synthetic, and the FDA has also not ruled on synthetic either.
And so this is a key point. It sounds like, just to clarify, then there are two types of commercially available spermidine. We can either get food derived or synthetic spermidine, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you're saying that the food derived the food derived spermidine has a higher bioavailability,
Yes.
or it's better
Yep.
safety, or what are
Correct.
the differences? Maybe
Well,
elaborate on that.
Sure, both of those things, but it also has naturally co-occurring cofactors. So with, for example, a wheat germ derived spermidine, you will have spermine and putrescine, all delightful names. And thank you, Fen Leeuwenhoek. But they have a role to play. So spermine helps with DNA methylation, turning good genes on, bad genes off. Putrescine is a precursor to both spermidine and spermine. And when the body gets too much of these these three-dimensional versions of spermidine, spermine, or putrescine, the body has a choice. Oh, well, if I don't need so much spermidine, I'm going to turn it into spermine for better DNA methylation. However, if you were to take a synthetic, there are some studies which indicate in animal models that the liver will turn synthetic spermidine into acrolein. And acrolein is a toxin, which is not good for the lungs. So I personally am very cautious until we actually have safety studies around synthetic spermidine. I would be very wary about it. There was a Chinese study using synthetic spermidine with older female mice, and a tiny amount seem to improve fertility, but a tiny amount more impaired fertility. And it's kind of like, I know you were in the UK last week, and I'm from Oxford, which is home of Alice in Wonderland. There's that wonderful image of Alice eating from one side of the mushroom to make her taller and from the other side to make her smaller. But what is the right dose? And as a medic, you'll know that the poison is in the dose. And it probably is a unique amount that is an amount that is unique to each of us because we're each bio-individual, and it can be based on gender, metabolism, ethnicity, genetics, epigenetics, age, all of these things. But what is that right dose? Whereas with food-derived spermidine, there's no such caveat. We know that if we're going to eat a lot of mushrooms, which is a source of spermidine, if we eat too much, well, we sort of know. The body tells us, hey, I've had too many of those. Let's just hold off, right? And we're unlikely to overdose. And even if we did, the body would say, okay, there's too much spermidine in these mushrooms. Let's turn it into spermine for another purpose, but which is good for us.
I see. So the food-derived spermidine are food precursors that help the body make spermidine from it, correct? Is
Actually,
that right?
they
Or they
contain
contain
the
it? Okay.
spermidine, exactly. So in our particular case, we have a gluten-free version, and then we have a wheat germ-derived version. And the wheat germ-derived version, well, both that and the other one, which is a unique strain of chlorella, we are testing every single batch to make sure that 1 gram contains the minimum effective dose shown to be helpful in humans, which is 1 milligram of spermidine. So we know that that dose is going to be correct. We can guarantee 1 milligram of spermidine in 1 gram of material.
Now you talked a little bit about the dosage, and I guess the measuring the effects. There've been studies that have basically shown that there are benefits to spermidine on animal studies and
Yeah.
even some human studies. I guess the
Yes.
challenge is with a lot of supplements is what do we monitor when we're taking it? I mean, measuring spermidine levels is
Yeah.
is not really clinically viable. So
Not yet. No.
just as a person now, I want to feel better. I believe spermidine helps me.
Yeah.
The evidence is there. So I take it. What shall I look for to know that I'm getting the right dose? What is the
Yeah.
effect I should see?
So there would be internal, because what I would call internal biomarkers, these would be things like C-reactive protein, TNF alpha, cytokines. And in my own case, my CRP just keeps marching backwards, so that my last CRP was 0.3, which is really quite low, especially for someone like me, former autoimmune patient. My TNF alpha, my cytokines have all dropped. They had dropped before, but even when I was sort of out of the woods, my CRP was 2.7. I'll have to go back and look at my test results. But 20 years ago, that was still high. It was almost 3 times higher than it is today. And technically, I'm not supposed to get better with age, but I am. And so that's those would be ways to do it. I've taken a glycan age test, which uses hundreds of biomarkers related to inflammation. I believe it's available in the United States.
It is,
And
yeah.
when I took that test, my biological age was 21, which at 60 doesn't make a lot of intellectual sense, but it's great to know that while I was aging prematurely at age 39 and probably had a biological age then of 60, I'm now 60 and I have an even younger biological age than I did before. So, I think that that gives us a lot of hope that we can maintain vitality as we get older. But from an external point of view, one of the first things that I noticed was my eyelashes got longer, and it was about the 5 week mark. And I'd never really thought much about my eyelashes, but when I talked to other people about it, you'd be surprised how many people care about having eyelashes. And this will explain why so many women go to the trouble to have fake eyelashes. But one place that you cannot glue eyelashes in are your lower lashes. And I've talked to all sorts of women who say they've also used something called Latisse to make their eyelashes longer, but sometimes that leads to melasma. So here's a way that you can do it without getting these side effects. And because, of course, we're talking about hair follicles on our eyelids, guess what? It helps hair follicles on the top of your head too. And how spermidine does this is it keeps the follicle in the growth phase of the hair life cycle for longer. So that life cycle can be 3 years to 7 years. And as women get older, maybe even some men who want to grow their hair longer, but women say, I can't grow my hair past my shoulders. I'd really like it to be longer. And so they go to the trouble of getting these expensive hair extensions, and that can lead to traction alopecia, all sorts of other problems. But if you can just keep the hair follicle in the growth phase for longer, then the shaft will grow longer past the shoulders. And that is one of the things that spermidine does. So people notice that. They notice because spermidine increases keratin, not just in the hair shaft, but in the nails. They notice their nails repair. So chemotherapy patients who they finish chemo, they're in remission, they report their nails being in a very poor state. And we've had great success with these patients regrowing their nails, getting them off of the drugs that they've tried before, which have a lot of associated negative side effects. That's one place. Skin as well. People report better skin. And we know that topically out of South Korea, we know that some of the healthy bacteria on top of the skin will actually they produce spermidine and they will signal to collagen to upregulate, which is a nice little bonus. And I think the final thing would be sleep. And sleep is it's one of those things I hadn't expected because there wasn't a lot of clinical data around it. There was data around clock genes, and there are 8 known clock genes that modulate circadian rhythm. And 2 of them had been shown to be influenced by spermidine positively, such that circadian rhythm went back to where it was previously when you were younger. And had customers not reported this so consistently, I was not looking for it, and I did not necessarily see it in the literature. But I think one other reason why sleep may be improved, certainly in women, is there was one study out of Canada with wheat germ-derived spermidine and spermine, and these women and men both showed improvement in hormones. And for the women, they had an increase in progesterone, and progesterone does help with sleep. So that could be one of the other signs if somebody's looking for, is this working for me? You would be able to look there. Hair, skin, nails, sleep, possibly mood because you're sparing your reserves of SAMe. And if we're looking at hair, in East Asia, doctors actually look in the corners of your forehead for the little baby hairs. And we've all seen it with little kids. They got all these little baby hairs at the front of their forehead, and they are actually a sign of high spermidine. So
Hmm.
if you start to get some of those back, then you know it's working.
Huh. So yeah, so many benefits, and then the inflammation markers you mentioned as well. And I guess autophagy is difficult to measure with lab tests or anything like that. There aren't any direct measurements for autophagy, that aspect of it, right? Other than the
Again,
secondary
yeah.
effects we're seeing.
Yeah, again, not yet. I mean, in the lab, there are certain biomarkers that we can look for to test for these would be precursors to autophagy or the result of autophagy, but it's not something that's widely available, though I am sure somebody's going to develop it because people are so interested, right? But we all know those individuals who have fasted do report a kind of clarity of thought afterwards. And the 1 milligram minimum effective dose was actually set on a study around subjective cognitive decline and where cognition improved over 90 days of supplementation with a wheat germ derived um, food supplement, which had 1 milligram of spermidine in it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and there's a small study of humans too, fasting in a water fast for a short period of time. They actually spermidine was one of the compounds that increased in their blood supply with fasting. So it makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense
Yeah.
that that would be there. So how about what do we need to watch out for as far as toxic effects? How do we know if we're taking too much, or is that a problem, or what's the risk profile with this?
The toxic effects would be more, I would be worried with the synthetic spermidine. With the food derived, the body has redundancies kind of built in, right? If you have too much, it will convert it into something else. Um, the contraindications, certainly for the wheat germ derived one, would be celiacs, anyone with gastric issues. Um, Obviously, we've got to worry about gluten as a lectin, potentially being an irritant to some of these folks with GI issues. Um, Now, there was years ago, people were worried that these polyamines could increase cancer. But there has been so much research that's come out recently showing that spermidine actually seems to prevent cancer even in animals that have existing tumors, elderly animals with tumors. And those papers were written by the 2018 Nobel Prize winner in physiology or medicine, Tsuko Hanjo from Kyoto University. And he won his Nobel Prize for his work on cancer, proteins involved in tumorigenesis. And he's saying, hey, wait, we have to look at spermidine because this is modulating the immune system. It is essentially reviving the immune surveillance of these elderly animals such that they can properly surveil for cancer, even when they have tumors already in progress. The immune system can switch back on, can see suddenly the tumors and get rid of them. And I think that is really exciting research, and I look forward to seeing that. So I always say, out of an abundance of caution, please do, if you have an active cancer, speak to your consulting oncologist. If that oncologist has no issue with you eating mushrooms, legumes like soy or cheese, and all these things have spermidine in them, then it's very possible that this food-derived supplement is going to be fine.
And how about just circling around then interactions? We touched on rapamycin and mTOR inhibitors, so it's not a problem with
No.
that. How about other things? Resveratrol, grapefruits. Are there any other supplements or prescriptions that people should be aware of that might have an interaction if they're going to take spermidine as well?
Again, you would look at the food from which it's derived. So
Hmm.
in the case of Primeadine, it would either be wheat germ or it would be a chlorella strain. So if your medications are contraindicated for use with wheat or with an algae, then it would not be appropriate for you. But otherwise, it should be, I mean, that would be the guide really for your consulting physician to look at.
So we've talked a lot about spermidine and the different the advantages to using it. And we talked about its risk profile, and we talked about things to be careful of when you're sourcing it, whether you get synthetic versus natural and the trade-offs there. So let's circle back now and talk about your company and what is your spermidine product like, and how does it fit into this framework?
Well, as a patient, I really was impressed by the immune modulating effects of spermidine. And this was the research done at the University of Oxford by immunology professor Katja Simon and associate professor Dr. Ghada Al-Saleh. And they had looked at how you could actually rejuvenate elderly immune cells. And this is not supposed to happen. We all know that if we have an elderly relative and they get pneumonia, right? You know, if a 26-year-old gets pneumonia, we think, oh, that's too bad, but they'll be fine. But if an 86-year-old gets it, we all think, ah, that could be like breaking their hip, right? It could be terminal. And what the research at Oxford showed was actually all we have to do is remove the amnesia of these immune cells. If we can help them remember their, basically their recipe book of antibodies, they can actually perform better than even younger people. So this was based on the animal studies at Oxford. The older mice were performing better than the younger mice. This was counterintuitive. We're supposed to get worse with age, right? But the hypothesis that Katja Simon had was that actually these mice have been around the block more times. They've seen more pathogens. They have a better memory. Yes, we can get wiser with age as long as the memory is there to remember all the things we've seen. And that's what spermidine did. It seemed to remove the amnesia from these elderly immune cells. And when I began to look, I saw a paper in Nature Pharmacology that was done by Professor Linda Partridge at University College London and also by Professor Brian Kennedy at National University of Singapore. And they were looking at the pharmaceutical targets to slow aging. And they ranked them by the hallmarks of aging. These are the discrete pathways down which scientists agree we age. At the time, there were 9, now there are 12. I looked at the chart that they produced, and rapamycin and spermidine were at the top of the chart. And subsequent to publication of that paper, 3 additional hallmarks of aging, inflammation, impaired autophagy, and gut dysbiosis were added, and all 3 were inhibited by spermidine. So that in all, spermidine hit 9 of the 12 pathways down which we age. And I thought, there's no safer bang for your buck molecule when it comes to longevity. It's hitting 9 of the 12 pathways. And with cell senescence, which rapamycin does hit, but spermidine does not, it looked like spermidine was not acting as a senolytic, it was acting as a xenomorphic. It was trying to rescue the senescent cells if it could. And that's, again, the work done at Oxford. With senescent immune cells, you can rescue them with spermidine. And, we don't say it can do that with all cell lines because we haven't tested in all cell lines, but we know that it can be done with immune cells. And that is really, for me, the breakthrough research that made me convinced that even though there was no patent on this because it's just a food, that people needed to know about this, and it needed to not be locked away in a university lab. It needed to be out with the public. Again, because as countries and societies, we're aging faster than ever before.
Yeah, yeah, this is so important. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we've covered a lot of material. And in fact, we're going to have a link in the show notes if people want to try this out and get a discount, and we'll have that link how they can order some and get it there. And this has been wonderful, Leslie, talking about this. Perhaps we're going to list it in the show notes also, but could you tell people how they can follow you on social media, and also the link to your website and your company's website, if you don't mind?
Sure. So I wear three hats. One is as a patient advocate, and that is just you can find me at Leslie's New Prime, because I like to think I'm just hitting the prime, the new prime of life. So it's LESLIES, the New Prime, all one word. And I'm active on Instagram. I'm also co-founder of a nonprofit called the Oxford Longevity Project. You can find that also on Instagram. All one word, Oxford Longevity Project. And then on the spermidine front, you'll find more research on social media at Oxford Health Span, SPAN, like the span of a bridge, also on Instagram.
Yeah, this is so important, and congratulations on beginning your second 60 years now. And
Yes. Yeah.
like we all are, that most important part of our lives until we begin our third 60
Yeah.
years. And that's a whole
Ooh,
nother,
that's a
that's a
whole
whole
nother ball
nother
game.
thing. But
Yeah.
the way things are going, we never know.
Yeah.
But this has been wonderful, Leslie. Thank you so much for taking the time with us and sharing your story and educating us about spermidine and what an important molecule it is, and how it may be able to benefit all of us in various ways. So thank you so much.
Thank you too.
If you are enjoying this program, please hit that subscribe button, or even better, leave a review. Your support makes it possible for us to create the quality programming that we're continually striving for. This episode is brought to you by L Nutra, maker of the Prolong Fasting Mimicking Diet. Use the link in the show notes for 20% off. What if your routine CT calcium scan could tell you even more? Now from a single scan, you get 4 powerful reports. Not just your coronary artery calcium score, but also your arterial age, liver fat levels, and bone mineral density, with no added radiation or time. Spotting heart disease, metabolic dysfunction, and bone loss before symptoms begin. And now it's available anywhere in the US, no prescription needed. Use the code Lufkin20 for 20% off.
Can I start? Is it recording?
It's already recording.
Oh, sorry. This is for general information and educational purposes only, and it's not intended to constitute or substitute for medical advice or counseling, the practice of medicine, or the provision of healthcare, diagnosis, or treatment, or the creation of a physician-patient or clinical relationship. The use of this information is at their own user's risk. If you find this to be on the value, please hit that like button to subscribe to support the work that we do on this channel. And we take your suggestions and advice very seriously, so please let us know what you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time. You should say that.
No, that's good. It's for you to say it. I think that's very good. You like it? You want to do it one more time, or is that good? I think that was good.
Yes.
All right.
You need to save the recording.